Absolutely. He made a comment saying that he believes that the statement was unfortunate and that the country, as well as members of the Knesset, need to remember that diplomacy and negotiations, any issues in the country, are fought in the Knesset. In fact, the direct quote, if I'm not mistaken, was democracy is fought in the Knesset and not on the streets, and definitely not with violence. And so really acting sort of as a fire extinguisher here, trying to put out the flames that have been so heated and have been starting between both camps here. Although I think the bigger question is the fact that he feels that there's fires to begin with, that he needs to put them out, but definitely addressing the fact that he feels like an unfortunate statement was made by a member of his coalition partners and trying to at least lower the tension on that, perhaps even maybe taking some kind of political responsibility, at least to maybe look or maybe push that side in clear waters, at least for now.
Well, we'll see if the rhetoric cools down a bit. But stay with us, Batya, because amid this political war of words, Prime Minister Netanyahu this evening presented to the public what he hopes, I guess, will be one of the key positive initiatives of his government, a plan to reduce the high and rising cost of living that is an increasingly heavy burden on most Israelis. And here is certainly a consensus issue, Batya, maybe not about the cure, but certainly the problem. Things are just so expensive here, even worse so with the recent global rises in inflation. Let's listen first to what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say on that.
We're announcing a series of initial measures to fight the generators of the inflation: the electricity, the water, the fuel, the property tax. These measures will immediately reduce the monthly expense of every Israeli family. They will do another thing. They will slow down the rate of the price increases and start turning the wheel backwards. The first step, freezing the property tax for a year. The second step, the freezing of recent increases in fuel prices, a reduction of 10 cents per litre. Third step, an average cut of 70% of the increase in the price of electricity. The fourth step is a 70% cut in the increase in the price of water.
Well, certainly, Batya, every bit helps, and that will be relief for most Israelis. The question is what kind of overall economic impact that might have.
Absolutely. Before discussing even the economic impact, it's no disguise by any consideration of the word that every country in the world is dealing with inflation at the moment, Israel included. The cost of living has skyrocketed, not to mention the price of food, the price of fuel, and obviously all this inflation comes back to two major factors. One, the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, and more recently, Russia's war in Ukraine, which is
problems that Benjamin Netanyahu can't solve, or any Israeli government is going to be able to solve.
At least, as you mentioned, it's a start, and he's trying, and I think this is going to be very interesting to see how this is being taken on both sides here. We already know that opposition members haven't said anything yet following the announcement, but Aryeh Deri, who is part of the coalition partners, as well as Yitzhak Goldknopf, both of them have made mention of the fact that this is a start, it's a good step, it's going to help maybe possibly even the more on the poorer side of the Israeli economy. What's going to be interesting is to watch where middle-class families chime in here in terms of how much of an effect economically is this actually going to have, whereas their major concerns are the mortgage prices, the price of rent, the cost of actual food and living. We have to remember Israel, even with all this inflation, is still 6 times higher in terms of the cost of living status than the United States, which is an incredible number. But Bezalel Smotrich also made some small comment that he threw in there about the fact that he's going to be pushing for ministers of the Knesset to now have a reduced paycheck, and he hopes that that's going to pass as well. I don't see how that's going to overall help the economy, perhaps overall make, Knesset members look better and have an interest. What's even more interesting, at least from what I took from this, was Benjamin Netanyahu making a claim that this is his primary target of his government, but it was not one of the 3 primary targets that he mentioned when he introduced his government, being Iran, the high-speed train throughout the whole country, and if you'll remember very clearly, the last one, making more friends with regards to the Abraham Accords and in the Middle East. None of them really mentioned the cost of living. So it's interesting that this is coming out now. I think the timing is significant given the fact that there has been so much heated rhetoric amongst both sides here that perhaps his fire extinguisher skills, if I may be so bold to say that, are now trying to find a consensus amongst the public. Maybe not in the way that everyone wants.
Or a distraction, the opposition might
distraction, but definitely some kind of general battlefield here, if you want, that most of the public feels the need to solve. he's trying to put his fingers in there.
Right, but of course, for more fundamental reforms are going to be needed, for example, to reduce the price of goods in Israel. And that means taking on some powerful constituencies in Israel. The farmers, for example, a key one, and that is one that is going to be more politically problematic for Netanyahu.
Absolutely. And also, if you remember, just a couple of months ago, the price of dairy products going up as well. And that's what I mean when I say that I think the middle class is going to find, in the bigger picture, what does, fuel and water and electricity really add up when we are struggling to purchase the home.
Freezing an unknown bill that's already quite high for them.
Exactly. So perhaps there's going to be a different sort of response from the middle class. This is undoubtedly going to be helping families that are more on the lower end of the spectrum here, that perhaps are struggling with such increases in inflation. But it's going to be interesting to see how this is received throughout the political spectrum. At least we know for now, these are the measures being presented. The response is going to be what's interesting in terms of the measures.
And I'm pretty sure this really just happened minutes ago, so I'm sure the opposition, the political opposition,
is gearing up
to have its response to this program. Batya Levinthal, thank you for joining us.